It's been in the back of my mind for quite a while, the whole climate change debate, environmental issues growing, pollution. So I've always felt very strongly about
The discovery that shook the palace came on a morning that seemed almost suspended in time. Windsor's winter air hung cold and still, while the pale sun cast faint reflections along the castle's ancient stone walls. Inside Clarence House, Prince William had arrived earlier than usual, seeking a rare moment of quiet before the day's duties began. The early hours were typically reserved for private briefings, handwritten notes, and a few minutes of solitude, small pockets of calm that those closest to him knew he cherished, offering structure in a life that seldom allowed stillness. But on this particular morning, that serenity was short-lived. Before he could take a sip of the tea waiting on his desk, an aide appeared, their expressions signaling urgent and delicate news. There was no rush, no raised voice, only the unmistakable tension of someone bearing information the palace never wanted to hear. Requesting a confidential moment, the aide prompted William to close the folder before him and stand. The previous day, a routine inspection had been conducted at Royal Lodge, the ivy-clad, tree-lined residence that had long been home to Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, a woman familiar with both the warmth and chill of royal life. The inspection aimed to ensure the property was structurally sound and met modern security requirements, and no one expected anything unusual. Yet, as maintenance staff cleared out an older wing, they uncovered a room that had been sealed for many years. Inside the sealed room was no ordinary collection of dusty keepsakes. Instead, investigators discovered a series of boxes filled with documents, recorded tapes, and personal writings whose existence immediately raised concern. The labeling was inconsistent, the handwriting varied, and the dates spanned decades. The materials appeared to belong neither to the Duchess nor to any officially catalogued palace archives. As the aides relayed the findings to Prince William, the room seemed to grow quieter, as if the walls themselves were listening. He asked for specifics: what had been found, why it was alarming, and whether the Duchess had any knowledge of it. Though many answers remained uncertain, the emerging details painted a troubling picture. Some documents referenced private meetings held on palace grounds during the tumultuous years of escalating conflict between the late Princess Diana and senior royal advisors. Others contained personal reflections allegedly written by individuals with no right to intimate family knowledge, while transcripts captured moments from the prince's childhoods, private memories that should never have been documented by outsiders. These were not merely forgotten papers. They were fragments of the most painful and politically sensitive chapters in modern royal history. William maintained a calm exterior, but those present noticed a subtle shift in his expression, a tightening jaw and a stillness in his eyes. The look of a man revisiting memories he had spent years compartmentalizing. Memories of chaos, intrusive press, and the heartbreaking disintegration of his parents' marriage. The palace staff explained that the materials had been stored in a corner room largely untouched for 2 decades. The previous occupant had briefly used it for storage before falling ill, leaving it sealed ever since. Investigators doubted the Duchess had ever examined it. The boxes seemed to have been placed there without her involvement, or possibly without her knowledge. Outside the immediate circle, news of the discovery began to ripple quietly among senior staff, fueling unease. The Duchess had long been a figure of contrasts, warm, affable, and generous, yet occasionally drawn into controversy. She had erred at times, but never in a way that suggested betrayal of the crown. The notion that her home now harbored documents capable of sparking an international scandal felt both implausible and deeply troubling. By midday, William had cleared his schedule, secluding himself with senior advisors and security officials. The mood was tense but resolute. Unlike previous crises, this was not a press attack or a public misstep. It was a ghost from the past, resurfacing without warning. William, acutely aware of the monarchy's fragile narrative, understood the stakes. The passing of the late Queen had closed an era of duty and quiet resilience, leaving his father, King Charles, to navigate a new age of scrutiny with little room for error. The public, fascinated yet critical of royal secrecy, could be unsettled by revelations of this nature. As dusk approached, a meeting was convened with legal advisors to authenticate the documents, trace their origins, and uncover the motives behind their storage. Who had used Royal Lodge as a hiding place, and why choose the Duchess's residence? Hours later, after the advisors departed, William remained alone, standing by the tall window, gazing outward at the winter landscape as he considered the weight of what had been uncoveed. Day's light faded behind the towers of Windsor. the weight of Prince William's role pressed more heavily than usual. He was not only a son who had lost his mother, he was a future king charged with protecting her memory, his family's integrity, and the stability of an institution older than the nation itself. Meanwhile, Sarah Ferguson received the first hint that something serious had occurred. A discreet message informing her that palace officials needed to discuss an unexpected matter involving her estate. Recovering from health challenges, she had hoped for quiet days with family, but now sensed that her peace was about to be disrupted. The situation was unfolding faster than anyone had anticipated, and though the full scope of the discovery remained unclear, one fact was evident. Whatever had been found in Royal Lodge had the potential to shake the monarchy, and this was only the beginning. William, known for his measured and composed demeanor, displayed a rare, subtle tension as palace archivists entered the briefing room carrying a selection of the most troubling documents. He straightened slightly, expression alert, and gestured for the folders to be placed before him. The first document he opened was a handwritten memo referencing Princess Diana, penned by someone with no formal authority, who should never have had access to such intimate details. Observations from the 1990s blurred the line between personal opinion and intrusive analysis. William read carefully, his breathing slow, turning pages with a deliberateness that betrayed the storm building beneath his calm exterior. A senior advisor offered to pause, but he shook his head. He needed to know everything. The second document was even more alarming. A series of transcribed conversations between Princess Diana and senior royal advisors during intense public scrutiny, likely gathered through unofficial means. William closed the folder after reading only a few lines, exhaling slowly, jaw tightened, while archivists continued to lay out notes detailing the young princes, their schooling, private moments within Kensington Palace, and the emotional challenges they faced following their parents' separation. These observations, written and stored outside royal control, suggested deliberate documentation of his family's vulnerabilities, possibly for leverage or influence. When he asked how the documents had been retrieved, officials explained that the room had been sealed behind a door swollen by years of humidity, with boxes stacked hastily, some wrapped in materials inconsistent with household supplies details that deepened the mystery. Finally, an advisor raised the question William had been avoiding. Could the Duchess of York have known about the room's contents? William responded with careful deliberation, reminding his team that assumptions would only cloud judgment. Whatever Sarah Ferguson had or had not known, she deserved the opportunity to speak before conclusions were drawn. Yet despite his measured words, a silent worry crept into his mind. The Duchess had endured financial struggles, questionable advisors, and individuals who had taken advantage of her trusting nature, any of whom could have placed the items in her home. Had someone exploited her vulnerability as a shield? William stood and paced slowly toward the window, a familiar gesture signaling his need for space to think. The cold winter light fell across his face, revealing a flicker of something rarely seen in him. Controlled, quiet anger, not at the Duchess or the staff, but at the idea that someone had exploited the most painful chapters of his life. Returning to the room, his voice remained calm but resolute. The documents must be secured immediately, and the review would proceed under strict confidentiality. No copies, no leaks, no speculation. The stability of the monarchy required precision, not panic. A security official then revealed another troubling detail. Some items contained dates corresponding to periods of high tension between the palace and the press, suggesting that outsiders may have sought to predict or influence internal discussions. While no immediate threat existed, the implication alone sent a chill through the room. William requested a full list of every person who had visited Royal Lodge over the past 2 decades, insisting the investigation begin immediately. It would be long and painstaking, but it had to be thorough. Meanwhile, word of the discovery quietly spread among senior household staff. No details were shared, but the atmosphere carried unmistakable gravity. Departments exercised heightened caution, and certain archival areas were temporarily restricted. Late that afternoon, Sarah Ferguson received her first official communication. Her response was immediate. She requested a personal meeting with William, emphasizing her desire for transparency and cooperation. Her tone, according to those who heard it, carried equal parts fear and sincerity. William agreed to the meeting, but only after reviewing the remaining documents himself. He needed a complete understanding before any conversation, balancing respect for her with duty to the crown. As daylight dimmed and Windsor's corridors fell into evening silence, he sat once more with the papers, reading the fragments of a past he had long tried to protect. Each page brought pain, shock, and a tightening knot in his stomach. This was no mere misunderstanding or careless oversight. Something deliberate had occurred within the walls of Royal Lodge years ago, and now, with its sudden re-emergence, the monarchy would have to confront the consequences. By nightfall, William knew one thing with certainty. The investigation would not end with documents alone. The past had resurfaced, and he would not allow it to unravel the present. Meanwhile, Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, received her first summons from the palace in years. A message that carried a weight she had not felt in a long time. Sitting quietly in a corner of Royal Lodge, recovering from months of medical treatments, she felt a familiar sinking sensation in her chest. Few matters in the royal world required the direct attention of a future king, and even fewer arrived cloaked in such urgency. Her sanctuary, the sweeping lawns and quiet rooms of Royal Lodge, suddenly felt heavy with an unseen pressure. Dressing carefully in a dark coat and simple scarf, she embraced seriousness and humility, then stepped into the cold winter air, pausing to steady her breath before entering the waiting car. As the estate blurred into streaks of grey through the window, she wondered what could have triggered such a crisis. At the palace, she was guided through familiar corridors, now tense and subdued, greeted politely by staff whose guarded expressions reminded her of the days when whispers about her marriage, finances, or missteps had burned through these halls. She was led into a small drawing room, warm and softly lit, walls lined with portraits of monarchs past. Folding her gloved hands in her lap, she waited, each tick of the clock echoing with unnerving precision. The door opened, and Prince William entered, offering a neutral, controlled greeting, the calm that unsettled her most. In his face, she saw both the boy she had once known and the steady, dignified man who had become the protector of the crown, guardian of his mother's memory, and head of a family constantly under scrutiny. Sitting across from her, he broke the silence. "Thank you for coming," his voice calm but serious. Her throat tightened. "Of course. I sensed something was wrong. Please tell me." William did not raise his voice or lean forward with accusation. He spoke carefully, explaining that a room on her property had been opened during a routine inspection, and that boxes had been found containing documents and recordings touching some of the most sensitive periods in modern royal history. The Duchess pressed a hand to her mouth, heart racing, realizing that something hidden, something she had never seen, had been stored in her own home. Wide-eyed, she said earnestly, "I swear I did not know. I had no idea anything like that was there." William studied her silently, neither hostile nor warm, but cautious, seeking truth, certainty, and transparency. Leaning forward slightly, her voice trembling, she explained that the room had not been opened in many years, and over time, the property had been filled with helpers, movers, organizers, assistants, and occasionally opportunists, leaving her unaware of what had been placed there. Over the decades, the Duchess of York had allowed people to come and go during periods of upheaval, some offering help, advice, or friendship, others potentially exploiting her vulnerability for their own ends. She vaguely recalled that nearly 20 years earlier, during a difficult financial period, an associate had delivered several boxes she assumed contained items related to her daughters or past charitable work. She had never investigated, merely asking that they be stored in a spare room, never thinking twice about them. William listened thoughtfully, aware that the Duchess had lived through turbulent years and unwise acquaintances, yet had rarely acted with malice. Still, intent was only part of the equation. Consequence was another. More emotional now, she admitted. "The idea that my home has been used for something improper horrifies me. Truly, I would never hide something like this. Never." William's calm gaze acknowledged her sincerity, but it alone could not resolve the situation. He asked gently whether she remembered any individuals, visitors, or unusual deliveries during the years the room might have been accessed. The Duchess tried to recall specifics, but time had blurred details, half-remembered faces, vague moments now loaded with new meaning. "I was careless with trust," she admitted softly. That was as close as she could come to explaining the inexplicable. She then revealed her deepest fear, her daughters. She worried they might be drawn into speculation or judged by association, fearing that another misunderstanding or scandal linked to her could overshadow their growing public roles. William's expression softened briefly, and he reassured her that her daughters would be shielded from unnecessary exposure, and that no conclusions would be drawn until the review was complete. When the meeting ended, the Duchess rose carefully, offering a quiet thank you, and walked down the corridor as if the portraits and tapestries themselves were observing her. Outside, the winter air hit sharply. She inhaled deeply, holding back tears. Whatever had been found inside Royal Lodge was not her doing, but it was now her responsibility. Inside the palace, William returned to the investigation room, aware that boxes remained to be examined and mysteries unraveled, and that this was no ordinary archival oversight, but something closer to a buried scheme. Night had fallen over Windsor by the time the final box from Royal Lodge was brought into the secure review suite. The corridors were silent, lit only by soft golden sconces casting long, watchful shadows. Most palace staff had gone home, unaware that the most consequential discovery awaited, sealed in aging cardboard and dust. The archivists moved carefully, gloves not only protecting the delicate contents, but signaling the reverence the materials demanded. This box differed from the others. Its label was barely legible, ink faded as if older than the container itself, tape dried and cracked, unopened for decades. A senior archivist, who had handled some of the Crown's most sensitive materials for nearly 30 years, paused before cutting the tape, later describing it as standing on a cliff, knowing a single step could reveal a landscape no one was prepared for. When the box finally opened, a musty scent escaped, carrying the unmistakable aura of long-forgotten secrets. Inside lay loose papers, scribbled notes, half-written memos, and unaddressed envelopes. But beneath them was something far more disturbing. A smaller, tightly sealed container marked only with a series of initials, without date or explanation. The room grew still. The archivist lifted it gently and opened it, and what he found made him inhale sharply. Photographs. Not ordinary photographs, but images taken in locations where photography was strictly forbidden, capturing private, intimate spaces. The photographs depicted rooms and interior courtyards never open to the public, corridors within Kensington Palace accessible only to family and select staff. Grainy and awkwardly angled, they appeared covertly captured, some blurred, others unmistakably clear. The archivist examined the first images before signaling a security official to alert Prince William, who arrived within 20 minutes, dressed for urgency rather than formality. His expression was composed, though attention betrayed his anticipation and dread. The archivist explained the contents. William requested to see everything. Lights were dimmed to protect the photographs. The first image showed him at university age, walking through a secluded corridor, unaware he was being watched. He studied it long and carefully. The next image captured a private family garden gathering at Kensington Palace shortly after the world had lost their mother. He and Harry had thought themselves safe from prying eyes. Then came an image of Princess Diana in a candid, vulnerable moment inside the palace, tired and deep in thought, completely unaware her privacy had been violated. His breath caught. Another photograph showed a senior advisor entering a meeting room with a confidential folder, captured through a door crack or shadowed corner. The implications were devastating. Someone with access had surveilled the royal family and deliberately hidden the evidence in the Duchess of York's home. William leaned over the table, jaw tightening, the archivist silent, sensing this was no mere archival discovery, but a deep violation of trust. He examined the edges of a photo. The camera was discreet, portable, neither cheap nor professional, capable of quick, unobtrusive capture. Dates on the back ranged from the late 1990s to the early 2000s. This was a pattern, not a single intrusion. His voice quiet but edged with steel, he asked who else had seen them. Only 2 people, the archivists answered. William nodded. The photographs must remain secure. No one else could know. Memories stirred within him. The constant threats his mother had faced, the conspiracies and whispers she endured, the invasions of her privacy, and the realization that someone within their perimeter had recorded her without consent hit him physically. The archivists then revealed a final envelope containing handwritten notes mapping specific palace rooms, security camera locations, and blind spots. William froze. This was infiltration, not sentimentality. The creator of the notes had access only through proximity, perhaps a staff member, advisor, or someone posing as harmless. The smaller container holding the photographs had been deliberately and carefully concealed, suggesting intent rather than accidental storage. William's face hardened, not with anger, but with chilling clarity. Someone had used Sarah Ferguson's home as a hiding place for surveillance evidence, likely because it was less scrutinized than official buildings, possibly due to her past controversies, or because the perpetrator assumed no one would ever look. As the meeting ended, William issued quiet but firm orders. The photographs would be placed in the highest security archive, their origin investigated discreetly and thoroughly, and every visitor and staff member connected to Royal Lodge during the relevant years would be reviewed. Outside, Windsor's grounds were silent, yet inside, a storm had begun. William walked slowly toward a private chamber, the weight of the photographs pressing heavily upon him. They were not mere relics of intrusion, they were a threat, a challenge to control, a test of strategy, and a reminder of the heavy decisions awaiting a future king. By morning, the palace stirred with quiet urgency, the corridors humming with restrained energy, as the investigation and the reckoning continued. The palace hummed with quiet tension, every footstep echoing sharply, every door click amplified by the invisible weight of the crisis. Prince William arrived early for the first strategy meeting, sleep-deprived and haunted by the photographs from the previous night. Each image clung to his thoughts like a shadow, a stark reminder of how vulnerable the family had once been, and of a threat hidden in plain sight for years, capable of shaking the institution he would one day lead. The meeting room, chosen for privacy with thick walls, secure doors, and no windows, held 3 trusted advisors, a senior intelligence liaison, the palace's chief security officer, and the private secretary. William opened the discussion simply. The depth of the breach must be determined, quietly and methodically. The security chief explained that Royal Lodge had been chosen as a softer target. Fewer security sweeps, a history of visitors, and a resident who, through no fault of her own, had lived through financial strain and complicated associations, making the home ideal for concealment. The intelligence liaison confirmed the photographs showed access to staff areas and private quarters, and that the notes indicated insider knowledge of palace security patterns, leaving the question whether the individual acted alone or as part of a larger scheme. The private secretary emphasized public risk. If these images surfaced, even without context, the press would erupt, and conspiracy theorists would reignite rumors surrounding Princess Diana. William asked the question that silenced the room. Could the perpetrator still be around? The liaison admitted it was possible. Staff turnover and contractors over the years made it impossible to rule anyone out. William clasped his hands, steady but tense. The matter must remain confined within these walls, handled quietly, methodically, without panic. He requested a full reconstruction of movements during the years the photographs were taken, with lists of staff, visitors, and contractors, all under the guise of routine security modernization. Later, he met with King Charles, who listened gravely as William explained the discovery. Charles acknowledged the seriousness. This was an internal breach, a betrayal of proximity. He advised caution, urging William to protect the family while seeking the truth quietly, speaking only when necessary. That evening, strategy solidified. The photographs would be sealed under maximum security, staff and visitor records reviewed, and anyone recurring during the relevant timeframe scrutinized. William decided Sarah Ferguson must be informed, deserving to know the gravity of what had occurred. When she arrived, he explained that the materials were evidence of long-term, unauthorized surveillance, clarifying she was not implicated. The Duchess, visibly shaken, whispered, My home was used for this." William reassured her the palace would bear the investigation, sparing her from facing the storm alone. As she departed, she asked him quietly to protect her sons, invoking the memory of their mother. That night, William stood alone in his private quarters, gazing at a photograph of his mother, smiling and radiant, unaware of the lens that had captured her decades ago. A surge of resolve overtook him. He would not allow history to repeat itself. The days ahead would be precise, controlled, and silent. No leaks, no whispers, no careless hands. He would follow the trail wherever it led, and when he became king, the monarchy would be stronger, shielded from the shadows now exposed. The discovery at Royal Lodge had changed everything. A turning point, a lesson in vigilance, and a reminder that the crown's greatest threats often rise from silence.